Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're going to be doing some box office breakdowns because we have some weekend actuals for a couple of new films and also some more numbers for some films that have been out for a long time now, including some updates on how much films have lost and how much they have made at this point in their box office run. So two new releases this weekend would be The Gentleman and The Turning. The Gentleman had a pretty decent worldwide opening with $33.1 million, while The Turning had around $8 million opening weekend, which overall for a horror film is not terrible, but for a film that had a $14 million budget, which means it cost $21 million, it definitely still needs to make a little bit more in order to get to the break even and the profitability margin, which I think it probably will hit by the end of its run, but really the second weekend, of course, will be the major teller of that story. For The Gentleman, it was very hard for me to really find anything about their production budget. All I know is that it was bought by the group that ended up distributing it for about $10 million, but that doesn't tell me anything about how much the film actually cost to make. Obviously, I assume based on the fact that a studio bought it for $10 million, we should probably take that $10 million number, but until I get a more official number from the various sites and sources that you can find that information from, I'm just going to leave that number blank for now, but I imagine that it probably cost between $10 and $20 million just on the fact that it was a smaller budget film, so it doing around $33 million was very impressive, especially with it having a pretty solid cast and being yet another Guy Ritchie film. So vote for those movies. I know you get excited for the box office. I know you do. Since we don't have any numbers for The Gentleman, I cannot say exactly what the current gain or loss for that film is, but I can say that right now The Turning is at a $16 million loss, which is likely going to go away for the most part by next weekend. But again, it's really going to depend on what that second weekend drop-off is. It could be very large. It could be very small. Since it only made around $8 million this weekend, I can't imagine it being a giant drop-off, because even at 50%, it would have to make around $4 million next weekend, which to me sounds like it's something that's very doable. However, because it is a lot more limited and at a very small opening weekend, it is not likely going to make a whole lot more than the the 8 to around about the 50% mark. Again, the 8 to 4, probably to 2 or so, and meaning that it probably will end up capping out around maybe I guess you could say $25 to $35 million by the end of its run, which should make it profitable. But again, we're gonna have to wait and see what those numbers actually are. Bad Boys for Life has done very, very well. In fact, this is now its second weekend, made $215 million. So right now it's only at the negative $5 million, meaning it is absolutely at this point in time going to be in the profit. It's going to be profitable very, very soon. So the minimum gain on this film is going to be, as it says right here, $49 million, with the most likely overall gain being around $86 million and the max being $123. I'd say it's probably going to be closer to this one because though it did have a strong opening weekend, I highly doubt that this is a film that's going to keep on producing week in and week out, just because it isn't that type of film. It is the third film in a franchise that really not a whole lot of people are crazy and gaga for. Again, $250 million is still very, very impressive, but it is definitely not the bonkers numbers that sometimes we see for that film. That film, though, did cost $90 million to make, meaning that the $135 million, again, is taken into account into how much the film has actually made up to this point and what it is likely going to make in the future. But again, negative $5 million at this point in time. The big number that I want to look at this weekend, of course, though, is for Dolittle. Dolittle has done very little at the box office, and that is indeed one of the best jokes out there today, and it just doesn't stop being funny because it's just a straight up fact now at this point in time. So after its second weekend, it has reached $91 million in the worldwide box office, which is better than it was yesterday. Again, we did get those adjusted numbers today, which means currently it's sitting at negative $207 million. That's right, negative $207 million, meaning that it's at a loss. It has not made its money back, and also, spoiler warning, it's not going to make back its money either. The best case scenario for this film is that it'll be a negative $153 million loss. Again, that's a best case scenario. Assuming that this film does better than what many people expect and does better than what most films do in any given run, that's what would make it even better than that. And even then, it would still be negative. Even if this film had a crazy, amazing run, it would still, by the end of its run, be probably well over $150 million in the red at that point in time. The most average and the most likely number that we'll see, though, is negative $168 million, with a worst case scenario being $184 million. Because this film has done so poorly in the first 2 weeks, I imagine it'll probably be closer to this number right here. But with all that being said, the week 1 to week 2 drop-off wasn't that crazy, and so therefore it is more likely to fall in somewhere between 184 and 168, again, in the negative territory, which is just terrible for that Robert Downey Jr. film. Looking at Underwater, continuing to not make money at the box office. Again, that is a Fox property that has been taken on, of course, by Disney, meaning that this is money that Disney did not put into the project initially. However, seeing that they took on the Fox studios overall, it means that they take on their debts as well, meaning that Disney is working with a $77 million loss on this film, and this film is also going to likely end its box office run around that amount. Again, between $65 million and $74 million, with most likely the loss being somewhere around $70 million. Once again, another Kristen Stewart-led film that is not making any money at the box office. Color me surprised. One movie that I am surprised about that it has not made more money than what it has already is 1917, which has now reached $200 million in the global marketplace, but is still negative $29 million. In fact, when you look at the overall numbers based on the first 2 weeks, again, based on that projection, it seems that what we're going to end up with is a situation where the film makes at best $16 million, but most likely will be ending its film and be ending its theatrical result at a loss. Now, I think that because this is one of those Oscar films, it is one that might get several re-releases and might get re-released if it wins a bunch of Oscars. I think that currently it is one of those films that is very likely going to win Best Picture at the Oscars. Obviously, I don't really give any credit to the Oscars anymore because I just think it's so corrupt and so political that it's nonsensical. However, it did win something called the PGA, the Producers Guild Awards, and normally when a film wins there for Best Picture, normally it goes on to win Best Picture at the Oscars. So because it's going to have that type of momentum, it's because it's going to have that type of focus at that point in time, I think that it might end up getting a little bit more than what is expected, and we'll probably see it break even. And if it doesn't break even in theaters, $7 million really isn't a whole lot for them to make up in the Blu-ray and DVD game, and I think that it's absolutely going to make it up there because I know I plan on buying one, and I know a lot of subscribers to the channel are planning to buy one as well because it was just a very, very well done film. Like a Boss, a film starring an all-female cast, $20.7 million, not making anything, currently working at a negative $31 million loss, and is set to lose money no matter what happens with that film. And again, color me surprised, and you can try and spin that however it is that you want to spin it. Rise of Skywalker, I know a lot of people are still interested in at $1,046 million, which again, based on, I would say, very fair estimates, assuming that it had around a $350 million budget, which I think is very likely with the reshoots that were being reported, and also assuming a regular standard marketing budget, which even then I think is being very fair because it really seems to me that they spent a lot more on marketing than a lot of people would probably assume that they would, but $525 million total spending seems very reasonable to me, and it probably is even more on the conservative side of many people's estimates, but that means that the film has indeed made $102 million in actual net gain profit, which again, hey, at least the film is profitable, but when your film is going to be making less in profit, net profit, than a couple other films that I'm going to talk about today, that is when you know that you're in for a very bad time. Cats is going to be a financial loss. We already knew this at this point in time. It's pretty much getting to the average of what it's likely going to finish with. It's basically only playing in a handful of theaters at this point in time, so it's not going to make that much more money. It's currently at a negative $103 million loss, likely going to end somewhere around $102 million, but obviously the max is around 109, so it is definitely still able to, there's definitely still a chance that it might not make even enough to get to that 102 region, and even then, it's still not a very good sign nonetheless. The Grudge made $40 million, or has made $40 million so far with a $9 million profit. Again, it's just one of those little itty-bitty horror films that only cost about $10 million or so to actually make, which means that it was pretty much guaranteed to make its money back at some point in time, and guess what? It absolutely did. Now, talking about some of those films that I think are going to have just kind of amazing how much better they've done, one is Frozen 2. I don't understand how this film is doing as well. I suppose you could look back and say, well, the first one was a giant hit. This one was bound to be one. And then I look at the story and I say, but the story's terrible. It's just not a good movie. It's not even a good sequel. It reminds me a lot of the short film they did where it's celebrating Anna's birthday party, which was god-awful, one of the worst shorts I've ever seen. It reminded me more of that than of the original film, and I'm not trying to say that it was all bad. Again, I think there was a couple of nifty new songs that they added in there, but overall it just was very forgettable. $1.4 billion, though, is nothing to snuff at, and that means the film has netted $551 million in net profit for Disney. So that is something that they are definitely very happy about. So again, can't spin that number. Another number we can't spin is Knives Out, which made $286 million so far. That's a Rian Johnson film that has $111 million in net gain profit. It was a film that cost $40 million to make. And so, hey, Good job, Rian Johnson. And as I've said several times beforehand, please stick with these smaller independent whodunits, continue to make your money, and leave Star Wars the hell alone because, hey, you're making money, you're making your studios money, so just stay away from Star Wars because we don't want you to ruin yet another movie because you've already ruined the franchise basically as it is, so just stay away from it and we'll all be happy. And you can be happy, I can be happy, it's great. But the fact that you have a film made by Rian Johnson, who at this point in time is more profitable than a Star Wars movie. Again, a small $40 million budget film has more net profitability and gain than frickin' the last Star Wars film of the Skywalker saga. Oh my goodness gracious. As I said, you can't spin the numbers. They speak for themselves, and I think that speaks very loudly. Another film that did better than Rise of Skywalker as far as net profitability goes, Jumanji 3, which has at this point in time made $737 million at the box office, but that means that it's made $254 million in net gain profit. So there's no chance in hell that Rise of Skywalker is going to come even close to that number. So again, the third film in the Jumanji franchise, making crap tons more in actual net gains, net profits in Star Wars. A Rian Johnson whodunit, low budget whodunit, making more than Rise of Skywalker. And of course, Joker, which because of its re-releases has reached $1,070 million. And someone made the good point that the film had actually never left theaters completely. And so even though it was put into more theaters because it was still playing at some locations, it would not be a separate release. So it has indeed made $1,070 million, which is a number I still question whether or not even Rise of Skywalker is going to be able to match it. It definitely could. And there's definitely a possibility that they could get to that point. But the fact that we're talking about a film either barely beating Joker or possibly not beating Joker at the box office, a film that only cost $55 million to make, yeah, that's really bad. That's really, really bad. And of course, it is currently at this point the most profitable film of 2019 at $559 million in net gain, net profit. Based on the films that I've been following, there could be other films that I just haven't looked into, haven't done the haven't crunched the numbers for yet. I do plan to go back into 2019, go into the box office numbers and see what were indeed the most profitable films of the year. You might have some people saying, "Oh yeah, we'll look at the raw box office totals, not taking out marketing, not taking out the theaters cut, etc." But I will break all those numbers down and try and get that video out sometime in the next month or so. Obviously, things are going kind of crazy here with work and everything like that, preparing for the Raven Awards, all that kind of stuff. And so I plan on doing that film, the most the most profitable films of 2019, but also the least profitable films, which you have, of course, you have Gemini Man, which lost $100 million. Terminator Dark Fate, or Woke Fate, as many have been calling it, lost $126 million. Of course, you're going to have Cats in that conversation as well. But what's amazing to me is that we haven't even gotten through a month of 2020 yet, and yet I can already tell you right now that Dolittle most likely is going to be the biggest box office bomb of 2020, and the fact that we can say that already speaks volumes about how little they prepared for that film and also how far the power of having a star in your film has fallen. And this is the reason, one of the many reasons why I think that you could see a major drop-off in a lot of the superhero films, a lot of the big actor-led films, big franchise films in the next couple of years, because I think that it's gotten to the point where fans are tired of it and they will not just leave their house for anything anymore, especially when they can just wait for it to come on Disney Plus down the line. And I think that they're going to realize that they've kind of kicked themselves in the foot with that one. Kicked themselves in the foot. How does that make any sense? That's right, it doesn't. But anyway, what are your thoughts about these numbers? Again, Dolittle is kind of the one that's insane to me. I just never thought that a film could cost that much money and just lose that much money. It's just absolutely insane to me that that's going to actually happen, that film's going to have a guaranteed $150 million plus loss. It's just insane. Didn't think that Bad Boys for Life would be doing as well as it is, but hey, I'm glad to see that happen because I hear that it's actually a pretty fun film. And what are your thoughts about some of the other films we talked about in their either loss or gains? What do you think is going to end up being the biggest box office bomb of 2019 when I officially crunch all my numbers? And please don't just put Rise of Skywalker again. I know that there's some people out there that are trying to say, but you're not factoring in these and this and this and that, but they're not giving me actual raw data that I can look to and prove without just saying, I'm speculating this. Again, I'm already speculating the numbers that I'm putting here. Again, I'm already, they gave us $275 million, which I don't buy, seeing that we have some reports of The Last Jedi getting around $313 million. Also, keep this in mind, too, that the reason why 350 might even be overshooting it and that 275 might actually be closer is because, yeah, let's say it costs around 350 or so million to make it, but they got some tax credits or they got some incentives. Well, at that point in time, that is something that they are being given essentially for free, which then goes and helps them basically cover some of the costs of the production of the film. So that's the reason why I'm being as fair as I can be, and that's why I don't know how much they spend on marketing, but I think this covers for what is likely going to be a little bit extra that they would have spent than the just typical times 1.5 margin for marketing that most films tend to spend, that most studios tend to spend. So I think that that's why this number is probably pretty close to accurate. And again, if we get more information as the film continues to not make as much money as Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and it continues to be the second lowest grossing film of Star Wars film of all time, as when you look to the actual raw net gains and net profits, I will, of course, continue to update you all and keep you all abreast of all those things. And I love, again, that just random words that just pop into my head. But let me know your thoughts about this stuff and all the things we talked about in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash the like button, give me a subscribe. It helps me out a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Check out Patreon, subscribe star if you want to continue to support the work that I do on this channel. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless. And now I want to give a shout out to my January Patreon members: animation commentator Brian P, Dion, Divex, Elizabeth M, Enrique Evangelista, fan addicts of film, Father Christopher Miller, hail Father, Frank the Tank and the Shawhan Wiener Dog Clan, Harold Francis, the Hunky Chunky Funky Monkey, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jeffrey Toon, JJ Jonathan Jerembeck, Lady T, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin, Orange Hat Reviews, Outpost Dyer, Perpetual Punster, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Sir Lanceloto, Theodore Bendon, The DJD Show, Those Two Ball Guys, and Tina B, and Sharon Ferguson. Sharon! Thank you so much for being Patreon members. And of course, to my Subscribe Star peeps, Larry, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, G2 Cool 99, Darkstar 57, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., US 888209 Fast, Dean Heiss, Harold Francis, J-Rod the Beer Guru, Nevalan G. Adams, and ZK Man. Thank you so much for supporting me this month. You guys freaking rock. And a special new shout out to Jeff Lebowski and Steve Glasker. God bless.